All right, welcome back, everybody. It's Tuesday, December the 1st. We have made it to December of 2020. Can you believe it? It's gone so fast. So today we are going to be identifying major issues George Washington faced as the first president. We're starting our fourth chapter in U.S. history today, guys. Okay, moving into the presidents. This is important because he's still considered one of the best leaders in the United States history. We know that nobody's perfect. We know that Washington had some issues as well. But, as far as leadership goes, I mean, he really did a good job. Today, you will be comparing and contrasting two significant rebellions as a way to show your comprehension. Our new era is called the Early Republic. We will discuss the policies, which is another word for rules, and difficulties, which is another word for affairs, the first five presidents faced. Now, it's important that we get used to these terms because that's the way it's tested, okay? Policies and affairs. Um, so let's get started. We're going to play a little game of Washington and you. What would Washington do? Are you a lot like Washington? We're about to find out. We're going to use the Google poll where you have that new little app where you can tell us what you would do. Let's see. If your two best friends were fighting, would you A, take one person's side to help them out, or B, remain neutral, not take sides? All right, make sure you choose what would you do. Well, let's see if you're like Washington. Washington wanted to remain neutral or isolate. This was his plan for the young country. He would not choose sides in an argument between countries to keep the United States from entering an unwanted war. Let's try another one. If you saw a fight outside at lunch, I know that we're at home, but think back to when we were at school. Would you walk away because you don't want to be involved, which is isolationism? Or would you go check out who's fighting and yell, fight, fight, fight? Got a lot of people who circle around and like to look at what's going on. Let's see what you would do. All right, let's see if you're like Washington. Washington knew that staying away from international conflict was important to save the young country from getting involved. So if you walk up to that fight, there's a good chance you might get pulled in if it's your best friend. But staying away, of course, is going to keep you safe from getting involved. Now for this one. And when you had a big project, what would you do? Would you prefer to work alone because you know you're the best at everything? Or would you find your smartest friends to help out and divide the responsibility? Let's see if you're like Washington. What did he do? Washington delegated, which means he gave work. He delegated offices to other capable representatives, and it was a way to keep the country organized and running smoothly. In other words, he got people to help him. Running the country is a big job. Miss Muella doesn't run the school alone. She has lots of help. And Washington came up with this idea of starting what we call a cabinet of advisors, a group of people to help out. So let's just recap again. What do we know about Washington? Well, we know that he believed in isolationism. He wanted to stay away from drama to stay out of war. He believed in remaining neutral and not taking sides. This was another way for him to stay away from conflict with other nations. Um, the word of the day is precedent. Okay. This is the first time something happens and it becomes a model for those who follow. Remember, Washington was the first president. Nobody had ever had that job before, guys. So pretty much everything he did was a precedent. Um, for example, the creation of the presidential cabinet, this idea that you have advisors, other leaders that you choose to help run the country. The presidential cabinet is something that he designed, and other presidents also follow and have their own cabinet. So today we're going to be discussing a quick event. Remember, history repeats itself. So let's see if this story sounds familiar to you. The name of this event is the Whiskey Rebellion. Rebellion means to protest violently, to violently go against something. But whiskey, why? The whiskey wasn't rebelling. Well, let's talk about what makes whiskey. Corn makes whiskey. But who makes the corn? Farmers make the corn. So what we're going to have here is a farmer rebellion over taxing of whiskey. Does that sound familiar? It should. It should, because it's almost the exact same story as Shays' Rebellion. The only difference is this has a different ending. Okay? This has a different ending. Now, let's take a look at our notebook. In our notebook, we have an introduction for Era 4 today. Okay? We're going to be looking at the foreign and domestic policy of each president. So today, you're going to be giving a current example of a foreign and domestic event. And then on the next page, we have the federal government power rebellions. So remember, Shays' Rebellion, we learned about earlier. Farmers rebel over taxes, and it proved a weak federal government could not secure the nation. Remember, those farmers were rebelling, and the Massachusetts said, help, help. And the federal government couldn't help because they were too weak. That's that W for weak. In the Whiskey Rebellion, however, remember, this is Washington's presidency. We have a stronger federal government now. Farmers rebel over taxes again, but this proves a strong federal government can secure the nation, because with a strong federal government, Washington is able to send the farmers home and tell them to pay their taxes. Okay? This is the big federal government power rebellions, yin yang. The only two rebellions we look at, same story, different ending, due to the power of the federal government. So now we're going to go ahead and answer these two questions with your team. Explain why the government was able to put down the Whiskey Rebellion and not Shays' Rebellion. And how do you think the nation viewed George Washington after the Whiskey Rebellion? Okay, so when we're done with that, we'll be done for the day, and I'll see you tomorrow.